user, which means you can speak it. And then you've got proficient at the top. So a band 9 would be someone who's a native speaker. And what you'll see here, it says most common, you've got 5.5 to 7. Particularly in Vietnam, I think most people who are looking to do the IELTS are in this area. And what I think you're all hoping to probably achieve is a 6.5 or a 7 on this score system. Why are you doing that? Well, this is actually going to get you where you want to go in life. Most universities will ask you for probably 6.5 IELTS and with no score lower than a 6. And if you're doing a master's, something like that, or a doctorate later, you're probably going to want to be a 7. So this is where it is. And this is kind of where I've aimed this presentation as well. We're looking more at these levels. So what takes you from a band 5 to a band 7, okay? 8s and 9s, very hard to achieve. But 7s are definitely something that's achievable when you're living in Vietnam, okay? All right, so let's move on from there. Let's go into speaking, first of all. So speaking, successful students communicate. They don't just read and write. And a face-to-face speaking test is most effective in assessing interactive communication skills. Okay, so what do they mean? You can see there, you've got the words communicate and interactive, they're highlighted in red. So basically, what this is saying is like when you have a conversation with the examiner in IELTS, you're communicating with them. You're not just remembering things and then regurgitating them. You're listening to the examiner and you're responding to his questions. This is going to become clear as I go through the slides, okay, why this is important. And I've linked this into a lot of the top tips. All right, oops, what happened there? Too quick. All right, so first of all, what exactly is the speaking test? So a lot of you probably know this, but does it, just using the chat box, I want to see if this works. How many parts are there to the IELTS test? I want to see if you're listening as well. So in the chat function, oh, gosh, look at that. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Well done, everyone. 3 parts. Perfect. Thank you. You are listening and you are correct. Yeah, there are 3 parts. And what do you have to do in each part? What's the timing and the topics? Well, I'll give those answers to you. Part 1, familiar topics, 4 to 5 minutes. So the examiner will ask you up to 10 questions, and these will be familiar things. We'll come back to the types of topics shortly. And obviously the test, as it progresses, it gets a bit more difficult. Part 2, you speak for up to 2 minutes, which can be quite difficult. It can be difficult to do this in your own language as well. But the good thing is you get 1 minute planning. And also with practice, you can get quite good at this as well. And then part 3, which I would probably say is the most challenging part, you get an unfamiliar topic. Now, unfamiliar, I don't mean you need kind of special knowledge, but you're not talking about yourself. You're more talking about ideas, okay? So in part 1, you might talk about books and a book you like. In part 3, it might be books that other people like and things like that. So that's what we mean by unfamiliar topics. You're not going to be talking about, I don't know, science or something like this, which you need to have studied, but they're just more about ideas than rather about yourself, okay? Right, so if you have got a speaker, please put it on mute, because I can hear a little bit of background noise, but that'll be very helpful, thank you. All right, so the assessment criteria. Now, I wanted to go over this assessment criteria because I think it's very important that we know how you are marked in speaking. And there's 4 areas you get marked in. First one is fluency and coherence. Fluency is kind of how fluent you're speaking and how easy you are to understand. Fluency is like speaking without stopping, okay? Stopping to think of vocabulary is fine, but stopping and repeating yourself, that's affecting your fluency, okay? So that's the first thing they look at. Lexical resource. Now, that word lexical is a fancy name for vocabulary, okay? And this is like, can you talk about the topics? Can you use less common vocabulary? Things like this. Grammatical range and accuracy. Okay, I think we all know what grammar is. If you've studied English, you'll know grammar. So this is what range you can use, and do you make mistakes when you actually make vocabulary, grammar. And then we've got pronunciation. And I think, as you know, that's kind of how clearly you speak, but it's not just about that. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, okay? But overall, a lot of it is about how you speak. Now, we have things called band descriptors at the bottom, okay? And you can download these, they're online, and this is what the examiner uses to grade you, okay? And it's really important that for you, as a test taker, you understand this, and you know what exactly they're looking for, because if you know, you're gonna know where you need to improve and where you're going wrong, okay, and what you're good at. So you can find these online, they're easier to download. I also think you may have been sent them before this presentation, but the easiest way to find them is just to Google IELTS speaking band descriptors and you'll get them. And here is the band descriptor. Now I know what you're thinking, teacher, I can't read that, it's too small. Don't worry, you don't need to read this, okay? The only important things at the moment I want you to look at are these things here. So you can see at the top, it says band, fluency and coherence, lexical resource, grammar range, pronunciation. And then down the left-hand side, you can see the numbers. This is telling you what you need to do to score in that area. Okay, we'll look at them in more detail, but first of all, most of you are probably going to fall in here at the point you take your test, okay? You'll be ranging from band 7 to 5, and most people who have been learning English fall into this level, okay? Let's look at the next part. So let's have a look. So where are we? Okay, sorry, that's the right slide. So how are you scored? So you probably might think, though, if you're a band 6, that means you're scoring this criteria in each band, and that's correct. Okay? If you got 6 for fluency, lexical resource, you would be a band 6 overall. However, it's not always like that, the IELTS. You might, for example, have good fluency, lexical resource, but your grammar is not as good and your pronunciation, they're in the band 5 area. So you scored 2 6s here and you scored 2 5s. Well, that means you're 5.5 for speaking. So this is how they determine what band you are for speaking, whether you're half a band or whatever. If you were 3 6s, you would be a band 6 if you have 1 5. And obviously you could be a 7 and then some 5s, but really they average it out depending on what levels, okay? Now, let's have a look at fluency and coherence. You can see here I've made this a bit larger. So what happens if, like, when we look at fluency, we said it was talking at length, okay? What if you can talk at length and you're band 7 and, you know, your hesitation, you're not hesitating, you're speaking quite fluently, but then your connectives, your discourse markers, or is he banded? The discourse markers are not as good and they're a band 6. So what can you do here? Because you can't be 6.5 on fluency coherence, okay? Well, what you need to do is you need to be a 7 on everything to achieve a 7. If you've got 1 6, you will be band 6. If you were 1 5, you would be band 5. So whichever you score the lowest, that's where you are. Might sound a bit unfair, but that's kind of the way it is, okay? And this is kind of important when we come to the tips, which I'm going to share with you shortly. Okay. All right, so moving on now, we're going to start looking at the tips for IELTS. Now, when I was putting this together, I was thinking, well, what tips should I be sharing with you guys? And I think the best way of doing it is to giving you the tips that can give you the most improvement in the least amount of time. So that's kind of how I selected these top 6 tips for speaking. All right. So here we go. All right, speaking test tip number 1 is practice. And you might be thinking, of course I know practice. Why are you telling me this? Okay. Well, I'll explain why. And practice is so important. And I think a lot of people think if they go in a classroom, they're going to learn and it all just goes in their head. But really, you should be practicing all the time as much as you can. But also, particularly around the IELTS test, it's good to practice because you want to be familiar with the test, okay? And you want to particularly practice doing the test. This is good because it's going to make you less nervous on the day. When candidates do take the exams, they are nervous. Pretty much all of them go in there and they're very nervous. What doing that is practicing. If you've practiced a test, it's going to make you much better. And also while you're practicing, you're improving your English, okay? So you're kind of winning on both ways. You're getting less nervous, then you're practicing your English. How can you do this? Well, you can find topics online. Practice with a friend, which is a good way of doing it. If you've got another friend, I mean, if you're at school, you're probably going to know people who are doing it. If you don't have friends to practice with, well, what can you do? Well, you can find some questions and you can speak to a mirror. You might think that's a bit crazy. It's actually a good way of practicing. You can look at yourself, which might be a bit crazy, but it's a good way to see how you're doing. Are you coming over nervous? Because confidence is important. Obviously, I think the best way is to get feedback from a teacher. The teacher will not only be able to test you, but they will be able to tell you where you can improve, which I think is the real value of getting a teacher. Another thing, how long do you speak per question? Now, this ties in a lot with what we're going to talk about later, but okay, so part 1, it's 4 to 5 minutes, you get 10 questions. Well, how long should you speak for each question? You don't want to speak for just give yes, no answers, but at the same time, you don't want to speak for 2 minutes. So what sort of timing should you be going for then? And we're coming back to that later in there. So what topics do you need to practice? So we mentioned this earlier, and I'm going to want you to type in the box again. Can you think of any topics that are studied in the IELTS? So, for example, one might be hobbies, for example. Can anyone type anything else in the chat? See what you know. Family, thank you, Zen. Yep. Excellent, top marks for you. And a Canadian flag. Health, family, good, good. Well done, Bao, Tan An. Culture, clothes, education, the news. Cinema, education, hobbies, art, absolutely. Technology, society, sport. You've got this, you know all this. Thank you very much. Transportation. Here we go. I think you ticked a lot of this list I've given you here. So yeah, all these things, hobbies, books, family, mobile phones, animals, jobs, pets, haircuts. I'd love to get that question if I was doing an IELTS test. Yeah, they're all in there. So yeah, general topics. Thank you, Thu. It's exactly what these are. And these will be questions like, so what are your favorite hobbies? Are your hobbies the same now as when you were younger? What? Let's talk about the news. Did you watch the news when you were younger? Okay, photography. Do you take many photos? Do you keep your photos? All these things. But you'll notice here, some of them probably easier than others. Like if I said to you movies, what's your favorite movie? You can answer that. If I said, what's your favorite book? Okay, might be a bit more difficult. So this is why you practice these topics, because you might not have a favorite book. You may have never read a book. Okay, but you need to think of something for the IELTS test. So just be by being familiar with these topics, you are going to be able to get better at them and be able to answer them. Art is another one. It's kind of a topic. It is in there occasionally, but it's something you might not be able to talk about. So things like looking at paintings, these have come up in the IELTS. So again, just be familiar with all these topics and be able to talk about them as well. Okay, so that's part one. Tip number one, practice. Tip number two, extend your answers. Okay, so what exactly do I mean by extending your answers? We're going to look at fluency and coherence here. And I said it was going to tie into the rubric, and you can see that now. So extending your answers, you could be a really good speaker. I mean, if I took the IELTS test, but then someone said, what's your favorite movie? And I said, Fast and Furious. Okay, that's not going to get me a high score. Okay, no matter how good I am at speaking. All right, what they want you to do is speak at length. So you can see here, band 6 is willing to speak at length. Band 7 speaks at length without effort. So you want to be practicing speaking these topics and speaking at length. Okay, so, oh yeah, my favorite movie is Fast and Furious. I've been to the cinema. I've seen it several times. I go with my friends. We have a great time. I love fast cars. I love where they go and see the movies. Okay, so that's the kind of thing you want to be aiming for, speaking at length. Now, I said earlier, you don't want to be speaking for like 2 minutes. So how long should you be speaking? Well, if it's a part one, you want to be aiming probably 30 seconds. These aren't exact numbers, but if you've got 10 questions and it goes for 5 minutes, well, that's 30 seconds per question. So 20 seconds, 30 seconds, this is enough. This is all you need to do. You don't need to speak for longer than that, but you should be willing to speak at length. The same goes for part 3. You'll get probably 6 questions in part 3, but the examiner will be asking you for more. So again, speak at length. Do not just give short answers to questions, even if it is kind of a yes, no question. All right. So extend your answers. And the good thing is, if you practice, it's going to become easy to extend your answers. Smile and be confident. Now, I did tell you these were things that are quick and get you quick results. Quick improvements. All right, where are we? So here we are. And this is around pronunciation. Pronunciation, there's two bits to pronunciation here. Firstly, it's how easily you can be understood. I think improving your pronunciation isn't something that is fixed quickly. It does take a lot of work. So what else can we do to improve our pronunciation? Well, I think you can smile and be confident. Now, what does that mean? It means you don't want to sit there. You don't want to speak quietly. You want to kind of be doing this. You want to be expressing your ideas. How can I smile if I wear a mask? Good. You can see it in the eyes. You can see it in the eyes, Zen, okay? But you're right. But it's not just the smile, okay? Confidence comes over with when you are wearing a mask. Good question, though. I like it. Yeah, it comes over. Just be confident. Speak loudly. Don't shout, but speak loudly. Don't rush what you're speaking. You don't have to speak very fast. Just speak normal. Speak fluently. Be confident. And this will hide a lot of the errors with pronunciation as well. So it says here, uses a wide range of pronunciation features, sustains flexible use of features. But what does that mean, pronunciation features? Well, I shall tell you on the next. Here we go. It's these things here. Chunking, word stress, sentence stress, intonation and rhythm. You can look these up for more information, but basically things is like chunking. It's like language. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? You don't say, what do you mean? It's like, what do you mean? So it's things like this. And the more confident you are, the more this comes out, okay? You don't want to speak like a robot. Word stress, what do you mean? Okay, this is like when you stress the words. Same as sentence stress. Intonation is how the sentences go up and down. And rhythm, it's like when you speak English, there's a rhythm to doing it. And all these things are just improved by being confident. If you're shy, you probably see this in your own language, okay? When people are very shy and you can't hear them, they're whispering, it's not good. But what you want to do is just be louder, be just more confident. And this is all going to come out, and it's all going to massively improve your speaking without actually improving your pronunciation, all right? So that's tip number 3. Number 4, high-level vocabulary. Now, I kind of, I lied a bit when I said they're all easy to improve, because vocabulary, okay, high-level vocabulary. Let's have a look at what it says here. To get band 7, which is what you want to be aiming for, uses less common and idiomatic language. Now, when you're speaking, it's quite hard to think, oh my God, I've got to use high-level vocabulary, because you're speaking, okay? A lot of what test takers do, they use the idiomatic language. Oh, it's, I let my hair down after a hard working day. It's raining cats and dogs. Just saying that isn't going to get you a band 7. You do need to use less common language, okay? Which is quite hard to do. So what can we do? How can we actually try to include high-level vocabulary when maybe we're not that confident about our vocabulary? What if I can't think of any vocabulary? Yeah, absolutely right. It's hard. If you're told to think of it, you can't. Well, what you can do is in part 2 particularly, is when you're planning. In your planning for part 2, but we said already you need to speak for 2 minutes. But the good thing about part 2 is you get 1 minute for planning. And what do you do in that 1 minute? Well, you get given a piece of paper, and then you can make notes. And you'll be given a task card like this. I'm not sure if you've seen any before, but here it says, describe a time when you needed to study hard for something. You should say what you study for, why you were studying, why it was important to study hard, and explain what happened as a result. And you can see there's kind of 4 questions here. And I would say you use this as a guide, okay, for what you do. You must answer these questions. So you can see here, there's 2 lines here. So what you do is you get your bit of paper and you do a cross on your sheet, and then you make notes for each one. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what you need to do is write down important vocabulary. Now there's 2 things here. I would write down your ideas. Don't write sentences, because this is notes and you only have 1 minute. So you need to write quickly, but you need to think of vocabulary and language that's going to help you. So what you studied for, it could be English. So write English down. But then you want to think of higher level vocabulary that you can somehow use in your part 2. And let's have a look. So here's some language that you could actually use here. Theoretical, educational, acquire, compulsory, valid, determine, establish, significant, review, concentrate. So these are all high-level things that you could do, that you could use it for. Why it was important to study hard. So you could be saying, well, I had to study science. There was a lot of theoretical knowledge that I needed to learn, needed to acquire, that's compulsory for me to be able to do well in my test. So just in that 1 sentence, I've been able to use 3 of those words. But again, this still isn't easy to do, which brings us back to point 1, which is practice, okay? Depends on which one you use, yeah. But again, what I would say with this, it is practice, because speaking for 2 minutes is difficult. It's difficult doing it in your own language. And I know some of my friends at home probably couldn't do this, okay? But the good thing is you can find some topics, you can go online and you can practice this. You can think of vocabulary, because a lot of these words as well are transferable to different topics. So find those topics, download them, practice speaking to a friend, a mirror, just practice planning for 1 minute and see how good you can get at planning, okay? And the more you do it, the better you're going to get, and the easier it will get as well. And you'll be surprised how quickly you can do it. Now, vocabulary, again, takes a lot of work to improve if you want to do it throughout. There's some really good books available. One I've used is Collins. I'm not here to promote any books. Collins Vocabulary for IELTS. So if it is something you struggle with, these books do introduce a lot of vocabulary. You can find these books online. They're in PHÚT as well. But this is something you can do, practicing this part 2, which will improve your chances of getting that band 7 score. Okay? Right, so that's tip number 4. Let's move on to tip number 5. Using a range or should be of grammatical structures. Okay, so let's go back into the rubric again. So we've looked at our fluency and our lexis and our prom. This is about grammar range now. So really, there's 2 parts to IELTS, grammar, range, and accuracy. And that really is, as it says, grammar range and the accuracy. So the first one is how many mistakes you make. So obviously, if you make a lot of mistakes, that's not good. And the less mistakes you make, the better you're going to get. Excuse me. All right, so, but what does it mean when we say uses a range of vocabulary? And you can see if we look at number 6 here, it says uses a mix of simple and complex structures. Okay, number 7 uses a range of complex structures. And then the rest is how accurate you do it. Okay, so what do we need? So here's some simple: present simple, present continuous, past continuous, future simple. So this is simple sentences. And here are your complex ones. And you can see here, present perfect continuous, past perfect, blah, 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 adverb clauses, noun clauses, adjectives. Okay, so all you have to do is use these in the test, okay? Now, I don't know about you, but I find that a little bit complicated, okay? I can't remember to do that. And when you're speaking, you don't think about the grammar you're using, you just kind of do it, okay? So, but what I will say, there's a couple of things here to point out, is you'll be asked questions in the past. So when you were young, what books did you read? So they're kind of asking you, seeing if you use the past tense there. Then they talk about, what about now? What books do you read now? In the future, do you think you will read these books? So they're kind of looking for that past, present, future, okay? But when it comes to complex, this is the best thing you can do, is you want to be using these clauses and conjunctions to improve what you're saying. So it's words like and, but, for, or, so, what, which, that. So the kind of relative clauses and things like this. And if you use these, what you're doing is you're taking those simple sentences, you're joining them together to make complex sentences. But again, this ties in with practice. And if you're speaking at length, you should be doing this anyway. All right. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. Examples. I live in a city where there is too much traffic. I work with a man who is very simple. Who is very simple? Very friendly. So I work for a man. The man is very friendly. You've joined it with who? These are complex sentences. So you're actually, just by using these clauses and conjunctions, you're changing simple sentences into complex ones. Here's another one. I live in Brazil, which is a pretty big country, and I like it very much, although the weather is a bit too hot. So again, you've made a big, nice, long, cohesive sentence there, using all these clauses and conjunctions. I lived in England before I moved to Vietnam. I did. Okay. I live in Spain because the food is great, although I think they eat too much fish. Absolutely. So here you go. That is how you can do it. And again, practice doing this. And I'll give you another tip here. If you're worried about your grammar and the number of errors you're making, record yourself speaking, play it back as well, and look for things like this. Look for the errors in your grammar and look for the complex sentences. It also works with pronunciation as well. Might not sound very nice, but when you're practicing, record yourself and then play it back, see what it comes out like. Okay, let's have a look at number 5. Listen to the examiner and answer the questions. Okay, again, you might be thinking, duh, what? Of course I'm going to answer the questions. Of course I'm going to listen to the examiner. Well, yeah, but a lot of people don't, and it can affect their score, both in the Fluency and Coherence and in Lexical Resource. Let's have a look here. So, the Coherence, number 7, Fluency and Coherence, speaks at length without noticeable effort or loss of coherence. Number 6, is willing to speak at length though coherence may be lost. So coherence, you could argue, is how well you're answering the question. Now, if you don't answer the question, there's an argument to say that it's not coherent. So if you're asked about your favorite book and you just talk about the advantage of reading, for example, you're not really answering the question. So you could argue that there's a loss of coherence. In addition to this, Lexical Resource, number 7, uses vocabulary resource flexibly to discuss a variety of topics. Okay, has a wide enough vocabulary to discuss topics at length and talks about familiar and unfamiliar, but with limited flexibility. Well, if you're not talking about, you're not answering the question, there's an argument to say you might not be able actually have the vocabulary to do it. And the examiner might be thinking, well, this person doesn't have the vocabulary to answer this unfamiliar question, and they're answering it in a very familiar way. Therefore, they can't talk about unfamiliar topics. Therefore, you might be punished on your lexical resource, all because you didn't really listen to the examiner and answer the question, okay? So you don't really want to fall into that trap. All right. So just before I give some of you the opportunity to have a speaking test, this is something you might not be familiar with, but you can do face-to-face or video tests now. So obviously face-to-face, you have an examiner and you go to an IELTS test center. You go to an IELTS test center and you sit in a room with the examiner. But now we're doing video call speaking tests as well. So again, these are conducted at test centers, but you will be, you will have the opportunity to be in front of a computer and you'll talk to an examiner over the computer. That examiner probably won't be in your hometown, they'll probably be overseas. That might be something you prefer to do now. An advantage of this is, well, preference, you might want to do that. But also you have greater test availability because obviously if the examiner's anywhere in the world, then there's more opportunity. And it just gives you an opportunity to do this face-to-face. So this is something you may want to consider, as well as doing a paper-based or computer-based test, which we'll talk about in writing because I think it affects writing a bit more. But also I'd encourage you just to, this link here, we're not going to watch it now, but there is a video which kind of introduces you to the video call speaking test. It's 6 minutes long. Google IELTS VCS and you'll see a 6-minute video. I believe it's on YouTube and you can find that out there. Okay, so that's an option there. But now we're going to practice some IELTS. Now, I would like some volunteers. So the first person to volunteer, I will ask an IELTS question. I will give a part 3 IELTS topic. So you're not going to have a full test. You'll just have basically, I'll ask you 3 questions or so, and then I'll give you some feedback on that. Okay, so would anyone like to volunteer? Just write in the chat box. Someone has raised their hand. Okay, where was that? How do I find if they raise their hand? Oh, there we go.
I can read the names out loud for you.
Hello.
Okay.
Sorry, it's okay. I got it. I asked to unmute. Okay, so Tran, you raise your hand. Can you unmute yourself, please? Tran Winter Chang. Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello.
This is Tran,
yeah? I can hear you clearly.
Sorry, is your name Tran or Trang?
Trang.
Trang, okay, Trang. Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions and I'd like you to answer them. Try thinking about the advice that I've given you already and go from there and I'll give you feedback. So you get to choose one of these 8 topics. Now you have clothes, education, an easy topic, a difficult topic, family, work, health, travel, or a mystery box. Ooh. What would you like?
Mystery box.
You want the mystery box? I knew it. I knew someone gave the mystery box. Where is it? Let me find it. Mystery box. The mystery box is internet. So we're going to talk about the internet. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so your topic is the internet. So, how reliable is the information that is on the internet?
Well, it depends on that website is, for example, like that website is such from the government or some really big company is maybe it's the information is more reliable than the website which is for example like a tabloid like that. So well, it just depends on that.
So what website wouldn't be reliable?
Sorry?
What type of website wouldn't be reliable?
Well, for unreliable, maybe like some of videos that are on the YouTube. Let's talk about like celebrities or like that, which is they have no evidence.
Okay, thank you very much. So how has the internet changed the way we work?
It had changed a lot. Like in the past, we used to go to work and work at in the office, and now like the technology is developed. So maybe some people they are work online, they are work from home, and there's also people just sit in front of the screen and they have no gain their knowledge by use the technologies like that.
So I'm just making notes while I say this. Okay, well, how has it changed the way we work?
It's changed. I have to say that it's changed. Like, well, we work. I'll say we work online together. You know, yeah.
What do you mean we work online together?
In the past, well, we don't have the internet, so we have to went to the office and we discuss for some things that we have to discuss face to face. And now the technology is developed, so we don't have to go to the office and have a big debate. Just see together from Zoom, and then we discussed about that.
Do most people have a computer at home in your country?
Sorry.
Do most people have a computer at home in your country?
Well, it just depends on their family, if they are quite rich or just enough. They maybe have the laptop or the computer. Just for some people, they are really poor. Like, well, many people live in a slum. The internet, they cannot access to the internet. So and they cannot afford the laptop, so they may not have one.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Trang. Thank you for volunteering. Yeah, good. Okay, I think you did a good job at answering those questions there. Fluency, it was good. It was kind of, to get the much higher scores, it would need to be a little bit more fluent, but I think that's something that would come with practice with yourself. Like when you said, I think it was the question about the way we work online together, it was kind of a short answer, and you want to just make sure you properly extend that. It wasn't immediately clear what you're saying. So that's kind of a cohesive thing. So make sure you're aware and you fully explain what you're saying. Vocabulary, I would say you need more or less common vocabulary, but there were some good things in there, such as sit in front of the screen. Okay, that was a good language, but you want to try and get more of that in. But again, it is quite a small sample that we're using. Grammar range and accuracy was pretty good, okay? But and obviously with a longer test, more of that was coming out. And the grammar and your pronunciation were your real strengths. You were very easy to understand. You want to kind of get more of a rhythm to what you're speaking, but that works with the fluency as well. So I think with practice, you can actually improve that, your fluency, and that would make the rhythm come as well in your language. Your grammar's good. Try and think how you can get some less common vocabulary in there. But otherwise, that was a very good go. Well done. All right, and thank you for volunteering. All right. So
thank you for.
Koi, your hand is raised, and I'll do none as well. Koi, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
Good. Okay. Koi, choose a subject, please. You can't have a mystery box.
Travel.
That is gone.
Maybe
What would you
travel.
like?
Travel.
Travel.
Yeah.
You find my question for travel. Okay, travel it is. All right. Why do some people prefer to travel abroad rather than in their own country?
The reason behind that may greatly depend on their opinion or their stand and why do they like to go traveling in their country or abroad. There's two reasons. Firstly, because they want to experience that what it would be like to be in another country and have what they can't have in their own nation. Secondly, people do not like, maybe they want to go a bit more expensive and glamorous in a more glamorous way, rather than going cheaply and experience not too much activities in their own country.
Okay, so do you think traveling to another country can change the way if you're not Koi, can you be okay, carry on. Koi, I'll repeat that for you. Do you think traveling to another country can change the way people think?
Traveling may change their perspective because of several reasons. Firstly, because they might see what they don't usually see as normal in the country. For example, here in Vietnam, we are very often horn when we are like stuck in traffic and are not patient at a person who is who is like just stop in the middle of the road. Secondly, they may have a different view because in the country they travel to, it may be a custom to do this, but not to do that.
What do you mean, do this, do that?
Like, it's vaguely like a social shock, I believe. Like, previously mentioned, we horn at vehicles or bikes and traffic, and in other countries, customs are different. Traditions.
Okay, thank you. Let's do one more question. How have holidays changed over the past few decades?
Holidays have seen a huge change in when they are applied and how long they will be applied. For example, Christmas. In past years, people often like hang out with their families and chit chat around the cozy cafe with a Christmas tree. But today, because of the pandemic, people have to see each other through the screen and not have physical contact with each other. And for example,
but what about when they go away for like a week or so? Have they changed?
Yes. No, that really don't change as much.
No change. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
And is it safer to travel now than it was in the past?
Could you repeat the question, please?
I can. Do you think it's safer to travel now than it was in the past?
As I could see it, it's significantly safer to travel to these days rather than the old days, because restrictions and regulations are reinforced more strictly and more efficiently than the past. Also, we have more police officers and safety guidelines that we have to follow when we are on trip, and the awareness of people traveling have been increasing. So it's clear to say that it's having safer for people to travel these days than in the past.
Thank you very much, Koi. Okay, Koi, good, well done. You were quite similar to Trang in the respect of like you're very easy to understand, which is good, because obviously pronunciation is the hardest thing to fix. And yours is good. It's fine. It's very much a native speaker. That rhythm needs to come a bit, but I think that comes with practice. Okay, and the more you speak, yeah, very easy to understand. Your grammar range was good, and I couldn't hear any errors there. So you just need to kind of expand the range. Vocabulary, fluency and coherence. I think you need practice and become more familiar with the topics, because you were losing it as you were thinking of ideas, but it was still very good. Okay, I'm kind of like picking on it a bit, and also what you were good at was the way you organized your answers. Like you said, the first question, there was 2 reasons. First of all, so you were actually thinking about organizing your ideas, which is really good. It makes it good for the listener. And you said, for example, and then you gave an example. So that's really good. And I would encourage you to keep doing things like that. When I asked the second question, you stopped and you thought about it. Just a tip for everyone, that's fine. That's a really good thing to do as well. But make sure, vocabulary-wise, you did have some good things in there. Physical contact regulations, which came in at the end. There was times you could have expanded a little bit more on your ideas. But again, I think that would come with time and practice. Okay, Koi. So it was really good. And just another point for everyone out there. You asked me to repeat the question. That's good. You can do that in the IELTS test. So I encourage you to do that. And as a note, Part 1, the examiner can repeat the question. They can't paraphrase it. But in Part 3, they can paraphrase the question to make it easier. Okay, so just to make you aware of that. But Koi, that was really good. Okay, just keep practicing, and the easier you'll get, the faster you'll get. The vocabulary will come out more, and that fluency will be there as well. But you've got the things that are most difficult. You've actually got, which is a pronunciation and a grammar. All right. So well done. Okay, I'll do one more. So những. You'll be the last one. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. You don't match your picture. Okay, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Would you like?
Excuse me?
Which topic would you like?
Maybe education.
Education. Okay, you didn't want the difficult one. Okay, education. All right, so những, what makes a good student?
I think to be a good student, that person need to be working. Like she or he has to spend as much time as possible for practicing and learning new skills which are not taught at schools, and they need to I think the confidence, because at school they will need to communicate a lot with teachers and friends. So I think that if they have enough confidence, they will have they can talk with people so as to broaden their knowledge or to make new friends as well.
Good. Okay. And what role should a teacher play in the classroom?
Sorry.
What role should a teacher play in the classroom?
I think that a teacher he or she should be passionate about his or her work. Like she, as well, they should care about the students. They should understand the student, like what are their problems or what they have to struggle with. So I think that teachers play a role just like a friend to a student to help them with their issues in studying at school.
What do you mean care about the students?
Understand their problems, what they have to do to achieve scores at school, or how do they get any pressure at studying as well. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think computers will one day replace teachers in the classroom?
I think no, because computers may be very intelligent. They can have every information that a student needs, but they cannot understand the student. Like the student can understand what they're studying, but if they have problems or if they have some stress, the computer cannot share with the students.
What like
a
what
teacher.
Sort of problems?
The problems that maybe the student may depends too much on the computer, that they have no communicate or speaking skill with the people around their social, like they cannot communicate much if the computers replace the teacher.
Okay, and last question, how has teaching changed in Vietnam in the last few decades?
Maybe about how the education combine the theory, the things we study, and how we use them in our actual life. Like these days, schools has added more extracurricular activities for students, so as the students can use the knowledge they study at school and use them in their real life. And they provide a lot of activities for students to
what type
study
of
and
activities do you mean?
like they they held some competitions for students to test themselves, like English competitions or debating competitions, so as to they use their knowledge, their studies from school, and they apply them to the competition.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Jan. Good. Again, 3 good candidates I just had then, so which makes kind of giving feedback, like thinking of something to improve, difficult. But fluency, good. Again, just like the previous student, Koi, you were really good at explaining your answers. Like question 1, you said, first of all, hardworking, and then you talked about confidence as well. And they really related to the question. So you completely answered the question, and then you expanded on the next point. So question 2, care about students, understand the students. Question 4, it was like extracurricular activities. Make sure you explain what you do as well. Again, your strength, your grammar and your pron, just like all of the students we've had doing this, they're really strong, okay? And they're good, and you would do well in an IELTS test with those. And the same for all of you, just practice a bit more, because I think what you need to learn is not so much language related. It's probably more the skills of taking the test, which is speaking fluently and easily, but also trying to get that vocabulary in as well. You're organizing your ideas, but you're at that kind of level where it's hard to push higher because you're doing well, but you want to try and include more complex vocabulary. So, and fluency a little bit more fluent, but that, again, that will come with practice, okay? But that was really good, Ngan. Thank you very much for volunteering. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, that's all we got time for because we're into the second hour now. So give me a moment.